Ladies and ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Senior Advisor to U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry, David Livingston.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Dubai. Welcome to COP28. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today for a first-of-a-kind discussion on advancing international partnerships for fusion energy commercialization. It's long been said that fusion energy is the canonical clean energy fantasy that has been 30 years away and always will be. But I'm pleased to say that we can say with utmost confidence that thanks to a fusion of public and private collaboration, not only across multilateral partnerships, but also driven by the engine of commercial ingenuity in the United States and in other countries around the world, that 30-year envelope to achieve clean energy abundance is finally within reach. Of course, no country, no company can do this alone. And it is for that reason that this promising clean energy baseload resource must be developed in concert among like-minded partners that collaborate with one another from the start, that build logically on the steps that have been taken by scientists, by labs, and by companies and workshops in the years prior. It is that sort of international approach to pulling together partnerships for the commercialization of fusion energy that we're here to discuss today. And it is my pleasure to introduce the perfect person to lay out such a strategy. My boss, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, Secretary John Kerry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I accept the nomination. What can I say? I am one of those 30 years from now guys, because when I was serving in the United States Senate and representing, I had the privilege of representing MIT and Harvard and so forth, and obviously proving it took a Yale man to properly represent Harvard. But I used to hear constantly, because when I was in the Senate, MIT would come to me and say, we've got this idea, we're really trying to pursue this thing. And I, without knowing that much about it, but went to work on it and got to know a lot about it. I visited many times, several times in Cambridge. And Bob Mumpower is here somewhere, I don't know where he is. There he is. Bob, thank you for a great visit at Commonwealth Fusion the other day. And my great pal who helped me enormously in the negotiations with Iran on the Iran nuclear agreement, Ernie Moniz, and our former Secretary of Energy is here, and he's taught me some things about this. But I would hear, as an energy source, really, it's going to be 30 years away. So help me. And go in 10 years later, it's 30 years away. But I happened to be out in California. I was visiting Google X and trying to learn more about some of the technologies that are online, and went up to the accelerator, Livermore Laboratory, and listened to the scientists there talking excitedly about what had happened in this minuscule of seconds that they had created enough heat to actually prove the process could in fact work. So I went out and saw a Commonwealth the other day where there's a great deal of construction taking place. So this is exciting, but I can't tell you how many years away it is. I'm not sure Bob or others can either yet. But almost to the day, 70 years ago, President Eisenhower delivered an historic Atoms for Peace speech. Now, I'm not mentioning that because you're in for an historic speech about atoms or fission versus fusion, et cetera, but I am here to say that idea of urging nations to come together to harness the power of science for peaceful pursuits and benefit mankind, humankind generally, clearly is more than a worthy goal. It's the highest aspiration, if you will, of diplomacy, of foreign policy, of strategic interests. And I thank the Atlantic Council, thank you, Fred, for the work you guys do always to bring the most relevant issues to the table at the critical times. So today I'm privileged to be here without any pretension in terms of escalating the size of the charge that we're trying to issue today. But I am here to try to again harness the power of fundamental physics and human ingenuity in response to a crisis. And in this case, I think everybody here understands, because you're at COP28, which is 27 COPs too many, you're here to help us figure out how we are really going to thread this needle. The crisis could not be more clear, and I'm not here to run through all of the evidence, but when it's 70 degrees above normal in the Arctic during the summer, this past summer, and 100 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in the Antarctic, and we're learning about this massive thousands of years of iceberg that has broken off because it was stuck in the mud for years, but now it's melting away. And so it moved, and it's going out towards Georgia Island, and it will, along with 86 million metric tons a day from just one fjord up in Greenland, continue to shock the scientists. And now we are hearing from the best scientists in the world that they're alarmed. Some say terrified. Others have altogether said we are in uncharted territory. And if you're a government official, if you're in public life, there is, after all, I think, a precautionary principle about governance, where when scientists are presenting you with facts, and Mother Nature herself is presenting you with facts, like 18 separate $1 billion climate events in the United States last year, you ought to stop and really think about what's going on and then figure out how you're going to respond to it. And that's what we're doing here. Fusion energy certainly can excite the mind, and it can excite the spirit of possibilities that exists in all of us as human beings. And the evidence is now clear about how critical this choice is for us to try to move forward faster. I personally believe, based on what I've read and learned and talking with people like Ernie Moniz and others, Ernie was just telling me a moment ago about how a visit he made a number of years ago when he didn't really believe completely in this possibility or this track. But a visit and the evidence of how far people had progressed convinced him, and I'm sure he'll talk about it on the panel, of the possibilities, and he's now fully engaged in this quest. So I believe, based on friends I have, people I respect, evidence that I've read, that there is potential in fusion to revolutionize our world and to change all of the options that are in front of us and provide the world with abundant and clean energy without the harmful emissions of traditional energy sources. And while we've had a little debate in the last few days about what the evidence shows or doesn't show of science, science clearly tells us, without any question whatsoever, that the cause of this crisis is one of the simplest things we could try to figure out. It's about math and physics telling us that it's emissions. It's the way we burn fossil fuels without capturing the emissions. And we have two options. Either capture the emissions or don't burn it. That's really where we are. And we got to figure out what we're going to do at a critical pace. Fusion, I believe, can be a critical piece of our energy future, obviously, along with wind and solar and nuclear fission and geothermal and other forms of energy. But the cadence of new and exciting fusion announcements has obviously increased over time. New startups are exploring exciting new modalities for fusion energy. There are a lot of different approaches that are in many of the different companies that have sprung up pursuing this, some further along than others, obviously. But all of them begin to tell us that new computational tools and new materials help us realize and harness the energy of a burning plasma. And of course, the landmark announcement about ignition from the National Laboratory last year. So we are edging ever closer to a fusion-powered reality. And at the same time, yes, significant scientific and engineering challenges exist, yes. And careful thought and thoughtful policy is going to be critical to be able to navigate this critical juncture. The United States was proud to announce its bold decadal vision for commercial fusion energy last year, built on a series of public and private sector partnerships to accelerate the research over the next decade towards a full demonstration of fusion energy. But it is clear we cannot realize this grand ambition, perhaps not at all, but certainly not at the pace we need to, doing it alone. Science is inherently international, and scientists behave differently from a lot of other folks who are engaged in these debates. And fusion has actually benefited greatly from a strong tradition of international partnership. The ITER, the largest science infrastructure project in the world, which brings together 35 nations and is critical to the effort. I think everybody understands we've got to improve the way the international effort can happen. And that's part of what will be talked about today as we lay out this road ahead for a international structure. Collaboration and knowledge shared are essential to beginning to accelerate what we're trying to do. And they are vital as we collectively tackle the scientific and engineering challenges that lie ahead. So, building on a decadal vision, I'm pleased to announce the U.S. International Engagement Plan for Fusion Energy. Engagement plan, key words. This strategy identifies 5 areas of work that will help us to realize the promise of this technology. And they are R&D, supply chain and marketplace, regulation, workforce, and education and engagement. And this is a call to action, folks. And you'll hear in the panel, you couldn't have a more distinguished panel. I think it will help lay out for everybody a clear understanding of this roadmap of collaboration and of sharing and of building on all of our strengths. This is a human challenge, mankind challenge. It is, in fact, as existential as it has been described. And if it is existential, and all of our countries are threatened, and they are, and all life is threatened, and it is, then we need to pull ourselves together with every strength we have and every capacity we have in order to pursue every option there is to get there as fast as we can. Atoms for Peace, which, by the way, was delivered on, I think, December 8th. So 3 days from now, we're sort of bringing history back together here. And it was really President Eisenhower at his best in terms of his vision. He is, after all, the president who warned us about an military-industrial complex. He had a vision in lots of ways. And it was ultimately about progress and harmony, setting aside boundaries in order to work as a united front. Together, I am convinced, with determination and with unity, with the spirit of cooperation, understanding the stakes, we can act with determination and unity. We can harness the remarkable power of atoms and matter in order to build a clean energy future, leaving a legacy of hope and sustainable and thriving world for generations to come. I think that's why this auditorium is full. I think that's why I see so many serious folks, many of whom I know, sitting here. This is a good moment, and we just need to make the most of it. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. And if I can now ask the panelists to come to the stage for a brief family photo.
You know, in the course of my political career and diplomacy as secretary, I have done hundreds of family photos, and I have never seen one of them. I'll show you this one.
Everybody looks at one camera at a time.
One big happy family.
Thank you very much. And now, Secretary Moniz, the floor and the mic is yours.
Well, thank you. It's working, yes. Well, first, thanks to the Atlantic Council, of course, for hosting this, but also thanks to David and, of course, John Kerry. I do think we have seen a historic moment. I believe the word fusion was pronounced from a stage at COP for the first time in these 28 years. So, and I think that this COP, I must say, I believe has shown a pragmatism that is notable, and I think one of the reflections of that is that we are discussing a much broader range of the technology options, for example, and certainly this panel discussing fusion fits into that category. John Kerry, I hadn't expected it, but he did mention that we kind of lived together for a long time in 2015 with the Iran negotiation. But what he didn't say is that was the same year that we also worked very closely together on the road to COP21 in Paris. And I think I can safely say that neither one of us envisioned that, we would see a decade of such innovation and such progress in fusion that would lead us to a COP28 stage to discuss fusion. He mentioned in my own case, I was frankly, what he said was quite accurate. I was personally a skeptic, and then I visited a company, TAE Technology, and was blown away, frankly, at the progress that we've seen. Then I was blown away when I saw a 20 Tesla magnet at MIT with Commonwealth, et cetera. And I think it's a very important datum that not well recognized broadly, that we have seen the order of $5 billion of private capital going into fusion, in addition to public capital in many countries around the world. But I think the $5 billion of private capital, to me, says somebody must think this has got a good chance of working. And I think that's what's really brought us all together here. So I think it's a terrific time to have this discussion. I hope that what will be conveyed is a sense of there is real optimism. There's not a guarantee yet, but there is real optimism that we may see, and I will be the first to make the prediction that in this decade, there is a very high probability that certainly the conditions for sustained fusion will be demonstrated in the remainder of this decade. Then moving on, of course, towards hopefully a scaling. And make no mistake about it, you will hear about it, I think, from our panelists. But with success, this is truly a game changer assuming this all comes to pass. So that's the context for this discussion. No pressure on the panelists, and I'd like to turn to this outstanding panel. I'll say just a word about them as I call upon each. I'm going to start with Bob Mumgaard here to my right. Bob is the CEO of Commonwealth Fusion Energy Systems, one of the privately funded companies. He's also on the board of the Fusion Association. And with that, Bob, why don't you say a few words about your take on kind of the status of the fusion, not just in the United States, but in fact globally?
Yeah, so we've known that fusion is sort of the holy grail for energy for a really long time, basically 100 years. The very first time we realized how the stars worked, we realized, that reaction, if we could actually use that reaction on Earth, it would really change the game. I mean, it's a reaction that's unlimited. It's a reaction that actually built every piece of us, like every atom is done in a fusion reaction. If we could do that on Earth, it would be not just an industry, it would be a transformation. And so we've been working on it for a very long time. And the science has gone a long way. It's actually gone faster than Moore's law in the sort of figures of merit that are about making that reaction happen. And, it sort of got talked about in the oil crisis, and that led to a big step forward. And then it kept going, and it kept going. And people sort of turned away from thinking about it, talking about it. But in the background, all of these scientists were working on it. And then all of a sudden, all these technologies started to be applied to it. Things like AI and materials, and it got better and better and better. And just in the last 5 years, we saw that we have, created the right conditions at a laser and NIF. We have multiple ways, multiple shots on goal in these companies and these other labs, and we have a really strong framework, particularly in the U.S., U.K., and Japan, and other countries, about how to advance this past into a commercialization. So, if you were to look at this, it actually has a bunch of, it's reminiscent of other times that science has gone through this jump from the lab to commercial. It's reminiscent of the early biotech, where you're starting to see real proof points in science and technology, government action, roadmaps, private capital, companies, all at the same time. Except it's benefiting from the fact that, unlike, say, the biotech revolution, we have like 50 years of other technologies that are accelerating innovation. And those are all on top of this. So it's just going faster and faster. And in the last 5 years, it's unrecognizable.
Oh, I thought you were going to say more. But that's okay. That's a good start. I actually do want to re-emphasize one of the things Bob mentioned, and that is that the integration now of these broad technology developments like AI and machine learning and other technologies, high-performance computing and the like, really are transforming a lot of science, but certainly in the fusion arena, it's having an enormous impact in accelerating the experimental programs that we all think are, at least have a very high probability of leading to success. I just realized also, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, Bob basically said it, but so fusion again, as opposed to nuclear fission, where one is splitting a very heavy atom, uranium, let's say, one is in fact here just going to the opposite end periodic table, bringing together two light elements and with enormous energy release. And just to be clear, one of the reasons why we're talking about this as a game changer is because it will provide the kind of constant or base load, clean energy, clean electricity that we need without some of the challenges that one has when one splits the heavy stuff. So that's really the background here. Let me turn to Kostas Samaras. Kostas from the White House, the Office of Science and Technology Policy. He was a co-host of last year's rather novel White House Fusion Energy Summit or something like that. And Kostas, maybe you can, the governments in the United States, but also many other governments around the world, showing great interest now in pushing this technology forward rapidly. Perhaps you can comment on the announcement we just heard and the decadal vision that, of course, came out of last year's summit.
Well, thanks very much. It's an honor to be here with everyone. As we've heard, fusion has benefited from more than 6 decades of federal R&D, including many decades at the Department of Energy and its predecessor organizations. And there's been international collaboration throughout that entire period. But we're really entering a new era now. As Mr. Secretary mentioned, last year we had the first ever White House Summit on Fusion Energy, and the President launched a bold decadal vision, and that includes advanced R&D. It includes milestone programs for public-private partnerships and new R&D opportunities with the private sector and international collaborators. Now, the challenge here is energy technologies have long taken decades to get from the starting place to the market, and we do not have decades. And international collaboration is one way to kickstart and supercharge the opportunities in fusion energy that we're seeing in the private sector and really accelerate the pathway between now and a commercial fusion power plant. And so we heard that the new international partnership announced today includes R&D, includes supply chain, it includes workforce, it includes public education. And really, it is about doing all those things at the same time. So just like a computer will take different tasks and break them up and do them on different chips, we call it parallel processing. We can't do all of those things independently and wait to build up a global supply chain and wait to build up a diverse workforce and wait to build out the type of marketplace and finance. We have to do them all at the same time. And that's really what this international partnership and the President's Bold Decadal Vision is all about, accelerating the promise of fusion energy for all in a way that brings this amazing technology to the marketplace and leaves nobody behind.
Kausik, can you just elaborate a little bit on some of the specific elements of the vision and how the government is looking to work with the private sector?
You know, as you mentioned, there's more than $6 billion
it keeps clicking up. Right?
in private sector investment in here. This is about using the milestone-based public-private partnerships, doing shared test facilities. So instead of having each place build their own facility, we can do shared test facilities, collaborate, and share knowledge across borders and boundaries so that we can understand at this really important juncture where we're rapidly advancing, and I think the biotech example, Bob, is a perfect example, is that we don't know how fast this can go. All we know is that we want to be ready with understanding materials in harsh environments, understanding how we can get and sustain a burning plasma, understand how, once we get that burning plasma, how to turn it into electricity or heat and be able to power all of the world's energy demands in a way that has zero emissions. And so this public-private partnership, this international collaboration really starts to build out all of these individual elements by digging into the science that enables the advancement of a fusion power plant along the timeline that we need to deal with climate change.
Thank you. And I would just add, along the lines of public-private partnership, for example, in the United States, the Department of Energy and its laboratories have already made available, for example, large amounts of high-performance computing to these private companies, which is very helpful. The high-tech sector has already applied things like machine learning approaches to advance the experiments. We just heard a few days ago about AI having a big breakthrough in terms of new materials. So this is very important. And speaking of the high-tech sector, we're going to turn to Michelle Patron from Microsoft. Microsoft is obviously one of those gobbler of green electrons. They want as many as they can find. So perhaps you could talk about what a company like Microsoft sees in the fusion developments and why it's so important.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you all today. At Microsoft, we have a vision for the world's grids that 100% of the electricity, 100% of the time, comes from zero carbon sources. And we have an important role to play. We are a large clean energy purchaser. In fact, we have purchased or we've contracted for 19 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity since 2013, and that's equivalent to about 10 Hoover dams. We are an investor. In 2020, when we announced our carbon negative goal, we also announced a $1 billion climate innovation fund, and we have deployed about $700 million of that in 50 investments in carbon-free and grid technologies, including in carbon-free and grid technologies. And we're also a digital service provider to customers across the power sector. So based on that, I have three observations. One, is that in order to meet growing electricity demand and to do it in a full decarbonization way, we need a multi-technology approach. We need to continue to invest, the world needs to continue to invest in solar and wind and storage and geothermal, but also needs to include these advanced carbon-free technologies like fusion. The second is that while we are talking about global issues and electricity is global, grids are also local. And so the mix will really depend on local politics and local economic and local social considerations. And the third observation is how important it is to couple procurement with strong policy action. And that's really what has gotten us to scale in renewable energy. We've seen it now happening in sustainable aviation fuels. And so that's kind of the theory of change. So earlier this year, Microsoft announced that we had a power purchasing agreement with Helion, another startup alongside Commonwealth, to send that market signal that for 50 megawatts of electricity coming from a site in Washington State, that if once this technology comes online, there are corporate buyers that want to purchase it. And as well, to help continue to take this down the cost curve and to continue go towards commercialization. Earlier today, Microsoft released a policy brief in which we're outlining kind of priorities that will inform our advocacy around fusion, policies related to development in order to get it from the lab to the market, policies related to deployment to help those first-of-a-kind projects to get built, and policies that are related to regulatory oversight, because it's a different technology and we need to establish a different type of regulatory framework that is both robust but also efficient, and that also, since this is a global technology and is going to be globally deployed, is consistent in countries around the world. And so we're just really, this is because of the progress that we've seen with startups like Commonwealth and Helion and the national labs, and that these are technologies that do have unique regulatory considerations. So having conversations like this is what the goal of the paper is meant to do.
We've talked about how AI, for example, can help advance fusion, but AI will also be a big consumer of these green electrons. Can you give us a sense of what's the kind of growth rate just for like one big company like Microsoft in terms of power needs?
So I'd frame it that there's two pieces to it. We talked a lot about that the AI has really the potential to really drive these huge solutions in some of these really complex energy systems, as well in creating new materials. And on the flip side is that we need to align AI with sustainability outcomes. And so we need to invest in the efficiency in the infrastructure and in the compute, and continue to advance carbon-free electricity, and continue to reduce the emissions of the supply chain that goes into the compute infrastructure.
We're going to turn now to Gabriela Hearst and have I think, a somewhat different perspective here. Gabriela, last I checked, even though she's going to MIT a lot, is not yet a fusion scientist. She is a prominent fashion designer and major advocate for fusion. And so it'd be great if you could say a few words about kind of your journey to this point and how you see fusion fitting into your vision of the future.
Well, it's been my journey on sustainability.
Oops, I think
There?
it's not working.
Hello? There? There.
Oh, there we go.
It's Gabriela Hearst. My company was founded with long-term view and sustainability. I come from a ranch. I'm seventh generation rancher in South America, so it's really long-term view. And through the journey in my industry in fashion on how to create with less impact, from the materials we're using to packaging, biodegradable, carbo hangers, you name it, measuring carbon footprints, on and on and on, really taking it to blockchaining every single garment that we had. And one time in October 21st, I'll never forget the date, I read an article on fusion on Financial Times, and it was on the private sector and the public sector. And all of a sudden, something in my brain went like, whoa, this is it. and I started researching it. I made it a part of my show for Chloe, and then I realized very early on, which if we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about energy, and we really need to focus on the moving away from the fossil fuel addiction that we have. This needs to move rapidly, and it was pretty clear that the demand, I think it's 85% of this world moves 85% on fossil fuels, and while we have great intermittent energies like wind power and solar, we need these other energies that can come and take the volume, which hydrogen, fission, and the potential of fusion. I have nothing against nuclear. I realize they just have a PR problem. But fusion had a communication issue. So I did a show in Paris talking to the fashion community. At the beginning, people were like, what is it, fusion food? What the... And it was really, breaking, really starting to tell people stories that are something to hold on to hope, right? Because this is potentially good news. And we got an article in Vanity Fair, which, it's out of a science journal, and it has become my holy grail. If I'm going to put all my energy into sustainability, besides the practice of my business, is that we are trying to create a business model that is successful based on these principles, but the bigger core of my mission is that. And I think that I have a unique position because I am not a scientist, I am not a politician, and I am not an investor. I am a woman, a mother, a creator that really believes that this is what can actually, one of the solutions that could really, really help the survival of our species. And so when I see hopes in the teams of Commonwealth, I met a lot of I visited Commonwealth, Helium, I went to ITER. This is actually a blueprint of ITER. And so I really feel that there's hope here, and I've seen the progress that just happened in 2 years, from people not knowing what we're talking about to, it's getting more excited. My best friend now calls me the Oracle of Paysandú because I come from Paysandú, Uruguay. But it's really the hope that I see in the community that I just invited myself to this party. Because I'll be like the cheerleader that you need when you have to get to that race and be like, you need to do this, guys, we need you. But I agree that the thinking has to be progressing. We do not have the time to the deployment that happened from the commercialization of solar panel and wind to that transition time, those decades that it took. We need to speed up. So this idea of thinking forward, and I also agree that the advancements of AI can really help with the experiments of plasma physics that we all know they're the hardest one. So you can call me the official cheerleader of fusion.
Okay.
Or party crasher.
You are so deemed. And let me also extend to you in real time your invitation to visit TAE as well, so you can see yet another technology.
Exactly.
You mentioned Chloe in passing, which I believe is your most recent, perhaps, fashion line. You want to say a few words as to how your fusion views might have influenced your work?
It was a challenging time. It was. Because the war in Ukraine just happened, and there was the energy crisis happening, and I had the fusion show planned, and I created a tokamak with a light. It was really providing my insanity and convincing other people. But I have to be so thankful for Chloe and for the group that supported that vision, because it took a lot of risk to be able to talk about energy at that time, and I'm really proud that we did it, because the awareness started to happen outside. We live in silo community, right? The fusion community, the science community has this information, but not the fashion community or other communities. So it's time to cross-pollinate information to bring more hope, and we all know that. Bad news sell more eyeballs, so just try to push the good news.
Well, our non-scientist was the first one to mention the word tokamak. Just for those of you in the audience who aren't so familiar, that is one of the technologies, probably, I think it's fair to say, the most prevalent technology over the last decades. And so we appreciate your bringing in the technical terms. Let me turn to Humphrey Mrema, and I hope I pronounced that name properly. Thank you. Look, obviously, this discussion is about the future, and it's good to hear, therefore, voices from the future. Humphrey is the chairman of the Youth Survival Organization, which probably gives a little hint in terms of how you're approaching this. And so could you, again, talk about that perspective in terms of the future, but also maybe talk about specifically about how you see fusion developments perhaps fitting into Africa, perhaps into Tanzania specifically, because frankly that's not usually top of discussion, and I think it would be very interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you so much. I'm so privileged to see that Youth Voices are also on board in this panel. If I put on the shoes of any African leader now, and you approach me to tell me about fusion, I will say no. Why? I will say because it's hard to start and it's difficult to maintain. This might be true to our context as Africans because of the current financial architecture that we are having. Statistics shows us that from only 60 banks, they have invested more than $5.5 trillion to fossil fuel since the adoption of Paris Agreement. I would ask why. If we are serious about climate action, if we are serious about cutting down emissions and stopping development of new fossil fuel projects, why the financial portfolio for fossil fuel is escalating day by day? While by 2023 this year, the financial portfolio for renewables, it's only like $1.2 billion. The question is why? We are speaking about fusion, very good discussion. We are speaking about inclusive. But when you come to Africa, we will say no. We will say no because until this point of time, just transition to Africa is unrealistic. I come from Tanzania. A normal business day for a person who has a grocery. He works in the morning, goes to his grocery shop, he finds no electricity because of power rationing. He decides to purchase a power generator which uses diesel just as a backup electricity, because his grocery, all the products will perish if they are not in a cool temperature. That is fossil fuel. A client calls, says, I want this amount of vegetables to my home. He decides to use a motorbike to deliver the grocery. The motorbike uses fossil fuel. When you come to him and say, we need electric motorbikes, we need electric cars, it is something which is impossible. The best way to solve this is revitalization of the financial architecture. If we know that more than 70% of the emissions are coming from energy, and a lot of money have been invested in the fossil fuel energy, then we have to change the strategy. We have to change the investment and channel it to the renewables. This is the solution. And something which we are failing the planet, we are failing the current and the future generation, is that we have good ideas. We have the best ideas. We are speaking about fusion energy, of which, for example, in my country, Tanzania, currently, our country has a demand of only 1,800 megawatts. And we are in deficiency. We are producing only 1,400. We are speaking about industrialized economy. We are speaking about green economy. But this is unrealistic because we don't have resources. Why? Resources are there, but are channeled in the wrong direction. We are going too fast, but I think in the wrong direction. The best way to speak to Africans, to speak to Tanzanians, to speak to the global south about fusion energy is three things, which have been highlighted in the Paris Agreement. We need technology, we need capacity building, and we need financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very important perspective indeed. I was now planning a lightning round of questions, but I'm told we have to make a lightning exit. So it's too bad because I had some good questions. But let me just then conclude by saying that we hope, obviously this was not a panel to discuss the technology directions, but what you can see is the incredible optimism and the incredible importance attached to the kind of breakthrough game changer that could be very, very much closer than is generally acknowledged. So I think we should come back at a future COP, maybe in a few years, hear the announcement of the breakthrough on fusion, and really get much more aggressively on our path to deep decarbonization. So thank you all. Thanks to the panel. Terrific. And we could go on, but thank you.